How hungry would you have to be to eat this? Imagine taking a bite and feeling something move in your mouth. It's not the crunch of a fresh crust, it's movement. Sailors grimly joked, calling weevil larvae sailor's pork, an unwelcome but vitamin B-rich addition to their diet. In the next 10 minutes, we won't just show you the disgusting menu of pirates. We'll reveal the psychological tricks they use to force themselves to swallow it. Because the most horrifying ingredient wasn't in the food. It was in their minds. We'll learn why pirate bread was literally alive, what ghost meat was that broke teeth, why rum wasn't a luxury but a vital medicine, and what desperate dish pirates resorted to when not even rats were left on the ship. The main course, sea biscuit or hardtack. This wasn't bread, it was a building material. Flour, water, salt, baked to the consistency of stone to prevent mold. You could fend off an enemy with it. It was less a loaf of bread and more an edible brick. Some hardtack from the American Civil War is still preserved in museums today, completely unspoiled. Pirates called it tooth dullers or sheet iron, but its main problem wasn't its hardness. The problem was the flour, which contained weevil eggs from the start. After months in the dark, damp hold, the hardtack would teem with larvae and adult beetles. Pirates cynically called this a protein supplement. A grim sailor's saying went, better to eat a worm than nothing at all. They even developed a strategy, bang the hardtack on the table to shake out some of the bugs, or eat in the dark, so you couldn't see what was crawling on your dinner. Hardtack wasn't just food, it was a living ecosystem in their hands. The second pillar of their diet was salt meat, beef or pork soaked in a brine so strong an egg could float in it, then dried to the consistency of wood. It was so salty and tough that it had to be soaked in fresh water for hours and then boiled for even longer. Sailors called it salt horse. Old pieces were carved into buttons and even belt buckles. Often, the meat was old even before it was salted. After months in a barrel, it would take on a gruesome gray-green color and lose all flavor. The smell was just as bad. It was simply salty fiber, a substance that required endless chewing. But if the bread was alive and the meat was stone, what did they drink? The answer is more dangerous than you might think. The greatest threat on a ship wasn't in the powder magazine. It was in the water cask. Inside the wooden walls, in the warmth and darkness of the hold, the water didn't just sit there. It lived. It bloomed, turning into a green, slimy sludge. Each cask was not a source of life, but a wooden petri dish, a perfect breeding ground for cholera and dysentery pathogens. Drinking fresh water after weeks at sea was a slow form of suicide, and the pirates knew it. At first, they tried to bring beer or wine. The low alcohol content killed some of the bacteria, but these beverages couldn't withstand long voyages either. After a few weeks, wine turned to vinegar and beer into a sour sludge. The scale was colossal. The daily ration of beer in the British Navy was 1 gallon per person. This was a huge, perishable cargo. They needed a drink that could survive an apocalypse, and they found it. The perfect sea beverage. Its high alcohol content killed any germs and prevented it from spoiling. It was high in calories, cheap, especially in the Caribbean, and excellent for morale. The very concept of alcohol proof was born at sea. Sailors developed a simple test. They would soak gunpowder with rum and set it alight. If the powder flared up, the rum was considered at proof, meaning it was over 57% alcohol. This was a guarantee that the drink hadn't been watered down. Rum became more than just a drink, it became a currency and the crew's primary motivation. But straight rum created a new problem: drunkenness, fights, and mutinies. The solution was found by British Admiral Edward Vernon, nicknamed Old Grog, because of his waterproof cloak made from a coarse fabric called grogram. In 1740, Vernon ordered that the rum be diluted with water. The sailors mockingly named this mixture after him, grog. It was a brilliant move. The alcohol disinfected the foul water, making it safe to drink, while the water diluted the rum, preventing the crew from getting drunk too quickly. Grog often had another ingredient added, lime or lemon juice, not for flavor, but to mask the disgusting smell and taste of the swampy water. Pirates didn't know about vitamin C, but they saw the results. Those who drank this mixture suffered less from scurvy, a horrific disease that turned gums into a bloody pulp and caused teeth to fall out by the handful. Scottish surgeon James Lind proved this back in 1747 by conducting the first controlled clinical trial in history, feeding citrus fruits to sick sailors. But the naval bureaucracy was more sluggish than any battleship. Lemon juice was only made a mandatory part of the British Navy's diet nearly 50 years later. The price of this delay? Thousands of lives. They solved the water problem. But what happened when even the rotten salt meat and living hardtack ran out in the hold? That's when the real feast began. A feast of desperation. The hunt would begin for anything that hadn't drowned or flown away. The most coveted prize was the giant sea turtle. They were easy to catch on shore and could live for weeks on deck without food or water. The ship turned into a floating larder, and the turtles became walking canned goods. Their fresh blood was sometimes drunk, mistakenly believed to be a cure for scurvy. It was a desperate attempt to get something fresh in a world of salt and rot. When the turtles were gone, the hunt moved lower, into the darkest and filthiest corners of the hold. For rats. On land, they are pests. At sea, they were the last source of animal protein. During long voyages, the price of a single ship's rat could be as much as a gold coin. This wasn't a matter of squeamishness, it was a matter of survival. Rats transformed from parasites into valuable livestock. Now, imagine yourself as the cook. An open fire sways on your galley, the most significant fire hazard on the ship. One spark could destroy everyone. You have one pot, damp firewood, and the carcass of a turtle. Or a dozen rats. Your job is to feed 80 hungry, desperate, and armed men in a way that doesn't incite a mutiny. You're not just cooking, you are maintaining a fragile peace on a knife's edge. Everything that flew by ended up on the menu. Gulls, albatrosses, any seabird that could be shot down. There was an old sea superstition that killing an albatross brings a storm, a bad omen. But when hunger twists your stomach, the fear of the gods recedes. Their meat was tough and tasted of fish, but it was fresh. When starvation became absolute, the last resort was used. This is not fiction. Historical records confirm cases of cannibalism. The most famous example is the whaling ship Essex in 1820, whose story inspired Moby Dick. The surviving crew members ate their fallen comrades. This was not chaos. It was a grim protocol, the custom of the sea. They drew lots to decide who would die next to feed the others. This is the darkest chapter in the history of survival at sea. But even in this hell, pirates had their tricks, brilliant ways to deceive not only their stomachs but also their minds. Eating bread with worms was only half the battle. The other half was not going insane from it. The first trick was brilliantly simple. They ate in the dark. Before eating, a pirate would take his hardtack and bang it hard on the table. The vibration would cause most of the beetles and larvae to crawl out. This was a psychological safety valve, a loophole for the mind that allowed them to separate the fact from the sensation. The rule was ironclad. What the eye doesn't see, the stomach won't reject. After that, they could eat without knowing exactly how much protein remained inside. The stone-like hardtack and wooden salt meat were crushed with a hammer and thrown into a common pot. Water or grog was added. After several hours of boiling, the result was a thick, gray stew, lobscouse. This dish was so ubiquitous that it gave a nickname to sailors from Liverpool, who are still called scousers, in honor of their local version of this stew. The boiling and alcohol killed some of the germs, and the softened mass at least didn't break their teeth. If there was pepper on board, it was used generously, not for taste, but for camouflage. Now, for a thought experiment. Imagine you haven't eaten for 2 days. Before you are 2 dishes. The first is a completely tasteless, rock-hard, but clean biscuit that might break your tooth. The second is a piece of meat. It's soft and high in calories, but it smells of rot and will almost certainly give you dysentery. What do you choose? Guaranteed safety with the risk of losing a tooth, or calories with the risk of dying in a week? Your answer is the psychology of a pirate. When pirates plundered a ship, they would throw a real feast. Everything they found, chopped meat, anchovies, eggs, onions, olives, grapes, was mixed into one huge bowl. Oil and vinegar were poured over the top. This dish was called salmagundi. Salmagundi was the culinary equivalent of a pirate raid. Grab everything valuable and mix it together before it spoils. The name itself comes from the French salmagondis, meaning a hodgepodge. To get rid of excess salt and soften the salt meat a little, it was sometimes tied to a rope and thrown overboard. The meat would be dragged behind the ship for several hours, rinsing in the seawater. This procedure was a gamble. On one hand, it made the meat edible. On the other, there was always a chance the rope would break or that the precious dinner would attract a shark. These tricks saved them from starvation. But what price did a pirate's body pay for such a diet? The final diagnosis is shocking. A pirate's most fearsome enemy was invisible. It didn't fire cannons, it sat inside their bodies. Its name, scurvy. Historians estimate that during the Age of Sail, about 2 million sailors died from this disease, more than in all naval battles combined. Without vitamin C, the collagen in the body literally dissolved. Gums turned into a bloody, swollen sponge from which teeth fell out. Old, long-healed wounds would reopen. The end was a long and agonizing death. The lime in their grog was their only, though not always available, salvation. Rotten food and foul water meant a constant war in their stomachs. Chronic diarrhea, vomiting, and food poisoning were not illnesses but the norm. A pirate's gut was a battlefield between hunger, putrefactive bacteria, and disinfecting alcohol. Add to this the head, the toilet, just a spot on the ship's bow, open to all winds and waves. Hygiene wasn't just poor, it was non-existent. Constant disgust, pain, and hunger shaped a particular type of personality. Brutality and a willingness to risk everything were not character traits but consequences of inhuman conditions. When basic physiological needs are not met, higher values like morality take a back seat. If you eat worms every day to survive, the value of another person's life drops sharply. Ultimately, the entire pirate diet boiled down to 3 brutal rules. First, eat what hasn't eaten you first, larvae or calories. Second, drink what won't kill you immediately. Water is poison. Third, mask, don't taste. Your tongue is a liar. In the end, is this whole story a hymn to human adaptability, or a chronicle of a fall into a primitive state? Samuel Johnson wrote, "No man will be a sailor who has contrivance enough to get himself into a jail, for in a jail there is better food, better company." Was it, first and foremost, incredible resilience of spirit or animalistic desperation? Write just one word in the comments, resilience or desperation. Let's see which opinion wins.